Hi everyone, I'm thrilled to be joining you today. As you know, students are facing enormous pressure to conform to constantly changing social and cultural ideas about how they should act, what they should believe, and even the issues they should care about. This pressure has left little room for their own convictions and ultimately for their freedom of conscience. And that's why your role as a teacher, helping students learn how to think critically for themselves, is so important. As teachers, it's not our place to change our students' beliefs or to tell them what to think. However, we can help our students navigate the marketplace of ideas by learning how to think critically. And we do this by creating a culture of pluralism in the classroom, one that is based on respect for freedom of conscience and the fundamental rights of others. And from what I've seen in the world, it works. We want to share some tools that will help you and your students navigate challenges in the marketplace of ideas based on the work we've done with teachers in dozens of countries around the world. And by understanding the role of human rights and freedom of conscience in today's classroom, your students will be better equipped to live according to their conscience among their peers, particularly those with whom they disagree, and to build a culture of peace and pluralism in their communities for everyone. In fact, that's why I decided to become a teacher 20 years ago. And I've had the honor of not only teaching in our public schools, but also working with teachers and students all around the world. Today, the challenges that you face are so much greater than anything I could have imagined when I began teaching. That's why we want to come alongside you with lessons and best practices that have been proven to work. I'll be sharing how you can incorporate lessons into your classroom that cultivate a culture of respect for the dignity and rights of others, especially among those who come from different backgrounds and beliefs. And when you learn how to model these values in your classroom, you will be amazed at how it transforms the culture of your classroom and students, leading them to have greater respect for you and for one another. I know because I've seen it happen. So please join me as I share about my experience training teachers worldwide how to lead students to promote pluralism and respect for the freedom of conscience and belief of others. If we can do it in places like Iraq and Sudan, we can do it here too. I'll share resources that can help you integrate these ideas into your classroom so you can get started right away. And if you'd like to attend one of our trainings, please send us a message. If you're interested, teachers who complete the training can also partner with us to facilitate trainings and initiatives in other countries, and we would love to have you join us. So if you're concerned about the challenges you and your students are facing, and you want to create a culture of peace and pluralism in your classroom where everyone's rights are respected regardless of who they are or what they believe, then this is the session for you. So let's get started to discover how you can transform the culture of your classroom, your school, your community, and even help change the world. Hello, I'm Tina Ramirez, and I'd like to introduce you to the work of Hardwired Global, which I founded in 2013 to provide real solutions to the challenges facing communities divided by differences of opinion, belief, and culture through education. You see, around the world today, 9 out of 10 people live in countries where they don't even have the basic freedom to live according to their conscience. Every day, innocent women, children, families, and communities are being attacked simply for who they are and what they believe. Sadly, the space for people to think freely, have their own opinions or beliefs, or to simply share their thoughts and express their conscience is shrinking globally. You see it in the news every day. Vulnerable communities are often marginalized and erased. Societies are fracturing along lines of disagreement and debate. These restrictions and challenges are at the root of so much conflict in the world today. Because, as you know, conflict never begins with things we agree on. That's why we exist. At Hardwired, we believe that everyone's rights should be respected regardless of who they are or what they believe. And we believe diverse opinions and expression can be vibrant points of discussion rather than flashpoints of conflict. Because human dignity and freedom of conscience are the very basis for a free civil society. Every person deserves to live with dignity in freedom. In fact, we like to say freedom is hardwired in us. And we're working to make dignity and freedom a reality for people everywhere through our training programs and educational resources. Since 2013, we have brought the highest level of human rights training to leaders on the front lines of conflict in more than 30 countries in areas of government, law, civil society, and education, so they can cultivate a culture of respect for the rights and freedoms of everyone in their communities. We have trained hundreds of leaders to overcome their community's deepest differences in pursuit of peace and pluralism. Our unique approach leads those we train to experience a change in their perspective of the dignity and rights of others, and ultimately in how they treat people who believe differently. As a result, Hardwired trained leaders are lifting communities out of conflict to greater dignity and peace worldwide. They're inspiring students to promote respect and dignity for others in the classroom. They're uniting communities to collaborate for freedom across faiths and cultures. And they're transforming legal systems to ensure greater protection for the rights of all people. You can visit our website to learn more about the great strides we are making for peace and pluralism in the world. And I hope you will join us to help change the world. I'm Tina Ramirez, and for the past 2 decades, I've been teaching students their fundamental rights in dozens of countries around the world. I've also been training educators how to teach their students about their fundamental rights to help lift communities out of conflict and into greater dignity and peace. My research on the impact of teaching human rights has been shared with educators at the United Nations for the past 20 years, and we're honored to be able to share it with you. When I began teaching U.S. history 20 years ago, I didn't want my students to simply read about their constitutional rights. I wanted these freedoms to come to life for them so that they too would be able to stand for them whenever they were challenged. I had a student who was a refugee from Afghanistan in my class. It was pre-9/11, and at the time, the Taliban were stoning women to death in the streets and destroying the country's Buddhist history. All the student knew was the fear, intolerance, and violence he had witnessed in his home country. And because of that, he had also become violent. But when he learned that everyone is born with certain inalienable rights, including the freedom to think, believe, speak, and even express themselves regardless of who they are or what they believe, he became more concerned about how others were being treated, and he began to change. And when he learned that these values had also influenced and been enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at the United Nations for all people everywhere, he wanted to help people in his former country. And by the end of the year, he wrote a letter to the President of the United States asking him to help those women in Afghanistan have a voice. He recognized that we are all hardwired for freedom and deserve to live in dignity and peace, regardless of our differences. 20 years later, those students are now young adults and remember those lessons. And the world is a better place because of them. I've been able to take the lessons I learned then and develop them more and train educators in more than a dozen countries worldwide where we are finding the same results. Children are developing greater respect for others, especially those with different opinions and beliefs, and the freedom of conscience and expression is growing. That's why I know how important it is for teachers to continually instill these values in their students. It will and is going to make a difference. Today's teachers face exceptional challenges navigating diverse ideas, opinions, and beliefs that often find their way into the classroom. You see it every day. Our ability to respectfully dialogue is shrinking, and children are disproportionately affected by the growing incivility in our public discourse. Consider how often you have witnessed the following situations in your classroom or school. Do your students feel pressure to look, act, and think in a certain way? And are they harassed and intimidated for not conforming? Are your students ever bullied or physically intimidated because they pray before they eat, wear religious symbols, or because they choose to fast in observance of their religious holiday? What happens if they don't practice a certain religious holiday? Are they made fun of? Are your students ever pressured by their peers to hide their true moral convictions or beliefs, fearing that expressing their opinion will lead to rejection? Are your students left out or isolated by their peers simply because they immigrated from a different country and speak a foreign language? Or are they cyberbullied through social media because they think or look different? If this sounds like your classroom, you are not alone. Sadly, this current of exclusion, isolation, and intimidation is growing everywhere. We are all witness to a generation of youth who are learning to value only those with whom they agree. They often don't recognize the innate human dignity of every person, nor do they understand the value of freedom of conscience for themselves or for others. And sadly, without sufficient support or a framework to address these challenges, affected students will continue to suffer spiritually, emotionally, and even physically. Students and teachers face a growing challenge. How do you navigate today's divisive social issues and still live according to your own conscience among your peers, particularly those with whom you disagree? That's why creating a culture of respect and pluralism is so critical. Because while so many of your students will be familiar with their basic rights and freedoms, these values must be constantly reinforced and modeled to help them learn how to interact with one another in a pluralistic society. For children who are from families that immigrated from other countries, they may have never lived in a culture where basic freedoms were embedded in their culture. And for students who may have fled to the United States as refugees, they may have personally experienced being attacked for their religious or ethnic identity. And they may have never experienced a pluralistic society with the freedom of conscience and other basic rights until they came here. We live in a pluralistic world with people of many different beliefs and backgrounds, and we will often disagree. This is why your role as a teacher is so important, because every day your classroom is a model for how children will learn to interact with one another in a pluralistic society. A pluralistic society is one in which people with diverse ideas, beliefs, opinions, practices, and behaviors can live freely in community with others. Pluralism is not just coexistence or tolerance, but a deep respect for the humanity of others who share the same inherent human rights as you do. And diversity alone does not create pluralistic societies. At the same time, pluralism cannot be achieved when there's blind acceptance of diverse ideas or an aversion to debate or share dissenting opinions. Pluralism requires energetic engagement with diversity and dialogue that recognizes the equal rights of others to hold their different opinions and beliefs, especially when you disagree. Pluralism is not about beliefs. It's about the person's right to explore ideas and express them in safety with others. It's so important that teachers learn how to foster a classroom environment where students learn to value the freedom of conscience for all people, especially those with whom they disagree. Because when they can safely express their ideas and beliefs, consider other opinions, and even challenge differences, they will learn how to interact with civility and respect towards others, which is essential for society to thrive and for its citizens to live peacefully among one another. I've spent the past 2 decades working in countries that are facing significant conflict over their backgrounds and beliefs. And so I've designed an educational program that helps prevent conflict among people by building a culture of pluralism. When ISIS invaded northern Iraq in 2014, they taught children living under their control to hate and kill people who believe differently. These children were born into recurrent conflict, which is why there is a space for ISIS to emerge and exist in the culture in the first place. And if these children were left to themselves, they would have eventually repeated the violence surrounding them. Or they could have been taught another way. But how can you undo the lessons these children learned, their fears, their bias, and their misconceptions of others? How do you rebuild trust and respect for others in this kind of traumatic situation? This is where Hardwired is unique. Because even before ISIS was defeated, we began training teachers in the area. And when ISIS was defeated, those teachers returned to their homes and began helping those children reconsider what they had been taught and develop a new respect for the rights and freedoms of others. We understand firsthand how difficult it is for children to process the information around them and to filter out intolerant ideas, misconceptions about others, fear and mistrust arising from their circumstances. We also understand how hard it is for teachers to create an environment where kids are able to work through their experiences without being attacked for the ideas and beliefs that they're still forming and revising. And we understand how much students are influenced by their environment and how difficult it can be to think critically and with respect for others' freedom of conscience. That's why we use analogies and a simulation in our training program. They create a fictitious environment where students can safely express ideas and feelings that they may not be comfortable sharing otherwise. Let me explain. Two Yazidi teachers in Iraq joined us for our training, and they developed a lesson about a garden that taught their students a powerful lesson about how to overcome the violence that they had witnessed. They took their students to a garden and invited them to make bouquets of flowers. The students could choose any flowers except for one particular color. And when they had all collected their bouquets, they returned to show them off. But the teachers asked them to look back at the garden and to see what had happened. It had been destroyed, and it was no longer full of diverse, colorful flowers and beauty. So the teachers shared how that was what happened in their country when ISIS came in. They destroyed everyone except for the people who looked and believed like them. And in that moment, every student was sad when they considered what they had experienced under ISIS. And then they began to commit to helping the teachers rebuild the garden. The teachers gave them packets of seeds to replant, and they eagerly did so. They also began to learn more about one another and how each student had fled from ISIS. When they returned to the garden, they saw its beauty once again, and they shared what they had learned. Before the lesson, they didn't have hope for a different future, one without conflict, and they still mistrusted one another. But they learned how they all had experienced the same violence, and that there is room for all of them in their country's future if they only work together. This was just one lesson and one story of how an analogy about a garden was able to transform a class of students to become advocates for the dignity and freedom of one another in their community. These lessons are for all of us. No matter what your situation is, we live in a pluralistic world with people from diverse backgrounds and communities who believe differently. And we need to learn how to get along in spite of our differences. Students everywhere come to the classroom with their own preconceived ideas about the world, ingrained in them from their families, communities, culture, and other influences. They each have their own bias, fears, and misconceptions about others. They feel the pressure of home, friends, and peers. And they are still developing their own values and beliefs about the world. It's not our place to change them or to tell them what to think. A teacher's role is to help students navigate these challenges by learning how to think critically, with respect for the freedom of conscience and human rights. And from what we've seen in the world, it works. Do you want to create a culture of respect and dignity for others in your classroom? I'd like to give you a window into what the teachers that we train experience through an important component of the training program that we've developed. It's our Fruitopia Simulation. Through this simulation, we will model how you too can teach for conceptual change. Now, conceptual change refers to the development of new ways of thinking and understanding different concepts, beliefs, and attitudes. And by integrating this pedagogy into our training, we're able to help teachers and ultimately their students recognize their own models for understanding, in other words, how they see a situation, and consider alternative perspectives or new ways of understanding their ideas and beliefs in the context of the rights and freedoms of others who hold different ideas and beliefs. Through Fruitopia, we can help you consider your own perspective about the rights you and others have in a safe, non-threatening environment. Throughout the simulation, you will be challenged to grow deeper in your own understanding of human dignity and the freedom of conscience. And by the end, you'll be able to recognize your own conceptual journey toward a deeper understanding and begin to apply the lessons and the pedagogies that you've learned with your own students. Fruitopia is designed to build greater respect for everyone's rights and freedoms in a pluralistic society. The simulation uses the analogy of fruit to better understand pluralism and what it means to live peacefully in communities made of people with different backgrounds, ideas, and beliefs. Imagine for a moment that you're a specific type of fruit, any fruit you choose. Now imagine that your fruit has the same characteristics as humans: a brain, a conscience, a family, and an imagination. What would life be like? What holidays would you celebrate? How would you interact with others in your fruit community or other types of fruits? Together, we will consider these important questions about life, first as fruit, and then we will apply what we learn and observe to our lives and our communities. In an in-person setting, you would use actual fruit and a variety of craft supplies to create your fruit identity. For now, you can draw your fruit using markers, colored pencils, or crayons. As you may have realized by now, this simulation is consistent with models of play therapy. Let me begin with an example. Imagine that I'm a peach from the peach community. We used to live in a country with many other fruits. We have large families and we were very happy in our town. Every year, we would all gather around the peach trees to sing songs and dance over a fountain filled with peach seeds. As peaches, we believed that the fountain was our source of life. And when a peach died, they would go into the fountain, and when someone was born, they would receive their name at the fountain and announce them into the peach family. Fruit from other towns often joined us. The peaches had other simple teachings. We believed that if we lived a good life, then the fountain of life would continue and our community would grow. Our peach community wore a special green leaf headdress to signify our belief in life springing from the seeds. While we do not have a special government structure, our main leader is the keeper of the fountain. Every day, he sits in the community square to give advice and settle disputes. We would be lost without him. Notice all the ways that I related the peach's unique qualities, both internal and external, to his imaginary character. The beliefs the peaches have about life and the celebrations, ceremonies, and symbols that brought meaning to their beliefs. The way their community was organized and how they relate to one another, their teachings and songs, and how hard life would be if they couldn't do the things that gave them and their life its purpose. Keep these in mind as you create your own characteristics for your fruit identity. The more creative you are, the more fun you will have throughout this activity, especially as you begin to interact with other fruit. Does your fruit identity reflect its unique qualities? Did you notice how your unique characteristics shape your beliefs, your practices, and behaviors, even your interactions with others, including what we wear, what we eat, who we marry, our celebrations throughout life, and even how we speak? Because in every pluralistic society, individuals reflect in practice and expression the deeply held beliefs and values that orient their life. Once you've created your fruit's identity, we present a challenge to you in the group where your particular fruit community, because of its unique characteristics and belief, is being attacked. Your entire community is affected, and you find yourself in a situation where life is unbearable. What could someone do that would make you feel this way? And when someone attacks the core of who you are and what makes you unique as a fruit, how does it make you feel? And if that were to happen to you, what would your initial response or reaction be? Would you fight back or try to flee? Or would you do something else? This is a crucial component of the simulation because it invites those who are participating to consider how it feels when they're attacked for what they believe or who they are. This is something that they may or may not have personally experienced. But to understand the challenges of pluralism, it's essential. For those who have never experienced this kind of discrimination, the simulation creates an environment where they are challenged to feel what it's like for themselves. And since they created the parameters of their identity, the analogy allows them to explore discrimination in a very unique and safe space. This is a critical component for two reasons, which we will address when we apply the activity to real life. First, it helps build empathy for people who are discriminated against or mistreated. Second, it helps participants recognize the interconnectedness of their internal characteristics, the heart, mind, and spirit, to their external expressions of them. In this way, they see not only how their distinct features and beliefs shape their worldview, but how they can better understand how it shapes other fruit communities, and ultimately, other people. And when their core values, beliefs, and ideas about the world are attacked or threatened, or when their external expression of them is restricted, they better understand how such attacks and restrictions can also become an attack on the identity of the fruit itself. In other words, the person. In a normal situation, you would be in a group for each fruit, and by experiencing this together in the simulation as fruit, you can better understand how intolerance can lead to conflict, unrest, and even violence. The next step in the simulation involves the fruit communities deciding to flee their homes, and that's when they arrive on Fruitopia. It's there that they realize other groups who were attacked have also arrived. including representatives of some of the same fruit communities that they were attacked by at home. It is there that they confront their perception of other groups, even though they are not connected to the groups from their own country, but because they resemble them. They consider their fears about the potential for more conflict, and they consider ways to defend themselves, which often leads to more isolation, fear, and prejudice. This is one example of an activity in the Fruitopia simulation. The simulation goes on to address other challenges to pluralism, such as competition over the allocation of resources, access to power, and rules or laws by which each community must live by. Through the experience on Fruitopia, participants discover that it isn't easy to rebuild your life in a new land. You need certain freedoms and resources to support yourself, your family, and your community. But when the fruits, or the people, in power do not understand your values or your needs, it's difficult to live according to your conscience in peace and freedom. In our everyday lives, this can become a great source of conflict among different groups. In some cases, the allocation of resources or access to power can even be used by leaders to create tension between different groups. Together, we can reduce tension between groups and advocate for those essential freedoms and resources that we need to live according to our conscience. To do this, we need to understand what ideas, including the fears, biases, or misconceptions, encourage intolerance or discrimination. Pluralistic societies require an environment in which different groups can actively express their opinions and have a voice in how they are governed. It's important to note that there's no single governing structure that ensures a pluralistic society. Pluralism requires active engagement in any society, and pluralism can be achieved in many diverse contexts. The simulation concludes by inviting participants to create a set of rules or laws that address the specific freedoms that they want to promote and protect their freedom in their community. Not general values you want to promote, but freedoms. For example, instead of saying all fruits should be treated equally, try to describe the specific measures of equality that are important to you in your community. Think to yourself, what does equality look like? Then come up with some of your own rules according to this deeper understanding of equality. By the end, you should now have an agreed-on set of rules that protects and promotes the freedoms of every fruit, regardless of what they believe. At the core, all fruit have seeds and are the same, and all people at their core are the same. On the inside, we all have a mind, a heart, and a spirit, though we may express ourselves and our beliefs differently on the outside. Recognizing the dignity of each person and the importance of their conscience and spirit to the human journey is essential for allowing individuals the space to determine their own identity, and ultimately enable us all to build communities where we can live in peace with one another, regardless of our differences. This simulation concludes with self-reflection and discussion of a series of questions that help participants relate their experience in the simulation to real life in their community. It is important to note that the path to peace and pluralism in Fruitopia, as in real life, does not require you to hold the same beliefs or live the same way. We use this simulation to help people learn how to work with others to secure the freedoms and resources that enable you to live according to your conscience and personal beliefs, and enable others to do the same. Since 2015, Hardwired has provided training and educational resources to teachers and children across the Middle East and North Africa. In our pilot program, we trained 56 teachers from Iraq, Lebanon, and Morocco to implement lessons in their schools, and approximately 1,200 children received instruction promoting human dignity and freedom of conscience. Through the program, Hardwired documented a positive shift in the culture of the classroom. You can find the full report of this study on our website. Our training program helps educators bring the message of freedom to life for students. Through a human rights-based education program, children develop greater empathy toward others and become better equipped to dialogue with one another and mitigate conflict. We use a rights-based approach that advances respect for human dignity and freedom of conscience through conceptual change. This pedagogy refers to the development of new ways of thinking and understanding of concepts, beliefs, and attitudes. By integrating this pedagogy into our training, we're able to help teachers and ultimately their students recognize their own models for understanding, in other words, how they see a situation, and consider alternative perspectives or new ways of understanding their ideas and beliefs in the context of the rights and freedoms of others who hold different ideas and beliefs. Individuals who experience a conceptual change in the way they view others and their human dignity exhibit greater empathy and willingness to include people with diverse beliefs in the community, or in this case, the classroom. In this way, our program helps people go beyond developing a deeper respect for the dignity and rights of others to a willingness to defend the rights of others, even those with whom they may disagree. It's important to note that conceptual change does not change a person's beliefs. Rather, participants experience a paradigm shift in the way they see and interact with others, and they become more open to greater engagement with and respect for a diversity of opinions and beliefs throughout society. If students demonstrate respect for human dignity and freedom of conscience, especially towards those with whom they disagree, we can promote a classroom and community culture in which students actively engage in dialogue and discourse with others, demonstrate nonviolent conflict resolution skills, confidently hold and express their own opinions and beliefs, are able to defend freedom of conscience for all people, exhibit respect for women and minority communities, and exhibit greater empathy and understanding for others. Our research has shown that the best time to engage students in conceptual change may be during later elementary and middle school. Children form their conscience by the age of 10 to 12. And so prior to this, in early childhood, children are most apt to believe what is told to them by an authority figure. After this age, especially during high school and young adulthood, students have more fixed beliefs, often a result of misconceptions and ideas based on inaccurate observations and experiences. Therefore, providing students with opportunities to engage in conceptual change activities just prior to and during elementary and middle school is especially important to develop respect for the rights and freedoms of all people in a pluralistic society. Teachers, too, will develop new skills. They will develop new skills in teaching pedagogies and curriculum development to promote values that are foundational to flourishing communities. They'll increase their ability to respond to challenges in the classroom, including bullying and other forms of conflict or hostility. They'll develop greater confidence in promoting a culture of respect for others and a diversity of beliefs. They'll be equipped to navigate challenging topics. They'll objectively and holistically facilitate or guide discussions about diverse, conflicting, or sensitive topics. And they'll be able to identify misunderstandings among students and their perspective of the rights of others and give them tools to address this through indirect channels. Listen to what our Hardwired trained teachers have to say.
Hardwired's first conference about education for pluralism was really very successful. It offered successful experiences in regions in the world that are really very complex and where that topic is a taboo. And they dared empower teachers, do it in their own way.
For these 3 days, I believe it was great because we could see children thinking more of things they never thought before and they were never exposed to.
We need each other. We are not meant to live in isolated. And I guess the children are understanding this. And I think seeing, in some kids especially, more open-minded, more desiring to have challenges.
This is how a Hardwired trained teacher used our program to counter bullying in her school.
I can remember one of the groups, the small groups that they were working with the puzzle, suggested that if we could have a campaign inside the school just to let others be aware of that concept and let others know that you have to accept the other.
Don't hurt if someone doesn't want to give or does not have something to give you.
Our programming will help you navigate your diverse student population, create a space of productive dialogue, and will mitigate conflict between students and teachers, and between teacher to teacher. Better yet, we have allowed for easy integration into your curriculum and the state standards. Watch the next video to learn how. There are many different approaches to addressing issues of diversity and inclusion in the classroom. Our training program has been tested with hundreds of teachers worldwide and can be adapted to best fit the social and cultural context of your community. Teachers we've trained and their students are able to navigate diverse ideas and opinions, including those with whom they disagree, and respectfully articulate their own perspectives, experiences, and opinions. Our unique rights-based approach, grounded in conceptual change theory, cultivates a culture of respect for human dignity, which mitigates discrimination and exclusion of others on the basis of their ideas, opinions, or beliefs. A rights-based approach is an effective way to promote equality and respect for people of all backgrounds and beliefs, because it nurtures an environment of respect and peace without causing guilt, blame, and further division. The training program begins with a conversation around what pluralism is, the active engagement of others, especially those with different backgrounds and beliefs, and the specific challenges to pluralism in your community. Once these concepts have been established and the specific issues for your community identified, we launch into a simulation to dive deeper into those areas. Teachers have an opportunity to experience the process of conceptual change through a lesson that they will ultimately share or adapt for their students. The simulation challenges the way that we see others and the rights that they deserve, and ultimately leads us to consider whether our perceptions need to be revised to make space for the rights and freedoms of others in a pluralistic space where everyone can exist in dignity and peace. The simulation offers a safe space to engage in discussion about difficult, often challenging ideas and perspectives. After the simulation, we can compare the analogy used with real-life examples of similar challenges that we face. And then you're able to articulate what rights others have, even when you may not agree with them. Teachers will be able to look back on the simulation and identify the conceptual change process that took place in their own learning in order to recognize when conceptual change is occurring in their students and make observations about changes in attitudes and behaviors that can equip them to more effectively navigate lessons to support greater student learning. Teachers will also learn how to ask the right questions to lead students to recognize and revise their own assumptions about the rights of others. They also learn how to develop lessons that they can apply to teach basic concepts like civility, dialogue, freedom of conscience, human dignity, equality, and much more. Hardwired trained teachers develop skills to identify challenges to pluralism in their classrooms. Bias, fears, and misconceptions students exhibit in their attitudes and behaviors towards others, and can develop strategies to address these challenges through lessons, activities, and discussion. Changed teachers lead to changed classrooms and students, but this requires conceptual change, which is a critical component of our program. A few notes about the program and how it can be adapted to your particular needs. The entirety of the training includes resources, curriculum development, and evaluation methods to provide educators with a comprehensive plan of action to address key issues present in their classrooms and communities. Throughout the training, participants refer to their Fruitopia Simulation experience frequently as a model for how to teach about the values of human dignity, pluralism, and respect for the rights and freedoms of others in their classroom. We developed an online format for our teacher training program as well. The program uses an online learning platform and blended learning format. This includes a combination of on-demand or self-paced activities and live training sessions to provide training to educators in a flexible environment. Our training is suitable for diverse learning contexts and can be adapted to address the unique priorities and objectives of education officials and teachers participating in the program. Furthermore, our program supports specific state standards in education, standards that promote freedom of expression and opinion, respect for diversity and nonviolence. It directly addresses the state standards for human rights education and specifically addresses the issue of bullying by promoting respect for diversity and freedom of conscience. For example, regarding constitutional freedoms and human rights, the First Amendment of the Constitution protects educators' ability to teach students the knowledge and skills they need to become productive, self-sufficient, and contributing members of society. Many states specifically include teaching about the First Amendment and human rights in their state social studies frameworks. For instance, in California, the standard says that teachers have the responsibility to model for students the constitutional principles of justice, fairness, and the rule of law. The American Civic Agreement found in the Constitution, particularly in the First Amendment, provides the tool for negotiating consensus on how to live with the deepest social and cultural differences. You see, in this way, our program can provide an effective means by which teachers can increase understanding of and respect for constitutional rights and basic freedoms among students. Now, related to anti-bullying and nonviolence. In recent years, national and state-level efforts to counter bullying of all forms have increased in response to growing concerns about the effects of bullying on students. Most states require schools to implement an anti-bullying policy, including prevention programs and specialized teacher training. So our program can support your school's efforts to mitigate bullying by helping students confront their own misconceptions about others and their own beliefs. It will help them recognize the innate human dignity of every person. And it will help them develop empathy to support others, even when their beliefs or opinions differ, and to avoid confrontation that leads to violence. Our teacher training is just one component of Hardwired's education initiative. Additionally, we support teachers in curriculum development and observation and evaluation. We also have materials that teachers can use in their classroom, including our children's book series. We've made the concepts presented in this session easy for young children in grades K through 5 to understand through our children's book series. Hardwired's children's books unite and empower future generations to defend our most precious and fundamental freedoms for themselves and for others. They were created in response to the need for successful models of teaching the importance of the respect for human dignity and fundamental freedoms that younger generations could understand and embrace. The books have accompanying lessons and activities in the back that bring the stories to life and lead children to see the value in each person, regardless of their differences of belief, culture, ethnicity, or other characteristics. You could easily incorporate these lessons as a unit in your existing curriculum and add them to your classroom library. At the middle and high school levels, we have other, more in-depth resources that you could use, including our Grow Together theatrical play. This play provides an opportunity for students to learn about the values of pluralism and respect for diversity, and equally as important, share these lessons with other students and their families as they present the play in their communities. And then we have our interview series. I am hosting conversations with educators, advocates, and experts in the field of human rights. Our interview series provides another layer of education to teens and older adults as they explore the evolution of human rights throughout history and where it stands in the modern world today. The men and women featured in the series demonstrate the importance of dialogue across differences, and they exemplify the courage to stand up for the rights of others. Share these interviews with your students or utilize them as part of a unit in your existing curriculum. We hope you enjoyed the Hardwired experience. Ultimately, if you understand that others' rights are essential for your own, you'll be able to model that for your students, and your classroom will become its own kind of Fruitopia, an environment that's more conducive to respectful dialogue, active engagement, and diversity of opinion. Teachers who complete the training can partner with us to facilitate trainings and initiatives in other countries. This is how we ultimately create sustainable change in communities and countries experiencing conflict. Master teacher trainers are a part of our ripple effect. The more teachers trained, the more classrooms and children's we can reach. So to learn more, please sign up and we will send you information on how you can get started. And if you would like to connect with a staff member to inquire about our resources, please email us at info@hardwiredglobal.org. Thank you.